Welcome to the Salvation Army's Family Night. We are so glad to be here with you. We'll be starting in just a moment, but we have a crowd here in Nashville, a crowd in Murfreesboro, and a crowd online. We're so thankful that you've joined us to take part in your child's literary future. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll look forward to being with you in just one moment.
So here we go. I'm going to talk to the people across Tennessee, and you're going to help me. Is that all right? All right, if you're glad to be here tonight, let me hear you for a moment. Now, you can actually see me on the screen up there in that little corner. I'm Major Ethan Frisell, the area commander for the Salvation Army in Middle Tennessee. As part of our role, the reason that I'm excited about Focus on the Future this evening is that when I was in first grade, I got a lot of U's. Some of you probably never got U's in school. A U was an unsatisfactory. I got an unsatisfactory in spelling. I got an unsatisfactory in reading. And I got an unsatisfactory in the ability to speak. Those U's I got from preschool to first grade and second grade made it so that it was hard for me to keep up. And I'm still not good at spelling, and I'm still not good at writing, but I've had to figure out how to compensate that. The beautiful thing this evening is that we're joining together so that children don't have to experience that same thing. We can say, I might struggle a little bit with reading, but I can change that. And thankfully, for the compassion of our state leaders in the Tennessee Department of Education and Curriculum Matters, we have a way for you to get tools at no cost to you that can change your child's future for the end. So, a couple of things that we asked today is as we do this, if you have any questions, just signal to one of the officers. We'll write those down and bring those in at the end so that we can have your questions. Let me introduce your speakers to you today. On the screen, you will see Scott Langford. Scott is the Chief Academic Officer in Sumner County Schools. Next would be Bria Sibley. She's a second grade teacher of Hamilton County Schools. And you wait until you hear her speak. She's all bubbly and happy about school. Sarah Vaughn, now she's scary to me because she's a first grade teacher, and I flunked first grade spelling. But I believe that together we can do better. Sarah is a masterful of helping children so they don't flunk in first grade and can be successful for years. And of course, our fearless leader, Robin McClellan, from the Tennessee Department of Education, who has spearheaded this opportunity for us as families, as parents, and as learners so that we might excel in literacy. Again, if you have any questions this evening, if you're online, please put them in the chat. And if you're with us, just touch base with one of the Salvation Army ministers, and we'll bring those questions to you. Scott, I bring that over to you.
All right. So let's start with talking about part of the reason why we've gathered tonight, and that's to talk about how important reading is. Now, for me personally, as Ethan mentioned his struggles, like I started off with a reading disability. My eyes didn't work well together, but I was blessed that I was a child of two teachers, and almost everybody in my family was a teacher. I grew up in a house that was rich with books, and I was read to constantly, and a lot of attention was given to me. So I figured out how to read. But as a high school teacher later on, I taught senior English. I taught AP English literature for kids that were going on to college, some to major in English lit. And they had all kinds of struggles with the way they read, the way they processed, the way they wrote, the way they thought. And when I moved into my current job after I was a high school principal, I began to ask why and where do we start to fix that? And when you do the research and you look at it, what you find is that all students reading well by third grade is the most important thing that we can do as a school system, as parents, as a society, as a culture. Reading by third grade is the most important indicator and predictor of high school graduation. High school graduation is important because when a child achieves high school graduation, it opens up a world of opportunities. Not everyone is going to go to college. In fact, nowadays, going to college, there are other options in trade schools and technical schools and other type of programs that open up a world of opportunities for kids to find a path that best reflects what they want to do. But being able to read by third grade is the first key step that opens up the door for all those opportunities. I think that as we talk about that, what we've gathered together tonight is a panel of experts, and I want to get to them as quickly as possible. Ethan mentioned them just a minute ago, and so we'll move and get to our speakers as quickly as possible because they are the experts at how we learn how to read. But I just want to highlight and accentuate that these years leading into third grade, it doesn't start by learning to read in third grade. It starts in pre-K. It starts at birth. And we want to make sure that we do everything we can to prepare our kids to be able to read by third grade. And that leads us into the fact that reading, oral language development begins at birth. Children have an ear for language and sound from the earliest of ages. You know, we've seen this when we first have a baby. Almost immediately when we start speaking, they turn their head, they look at us, and they listen. Now, when they hit 2, the ears kind of go away for a little while. They actually are listening. It's just the difference between listening and obeying, but they are hearing. What's amazing that happens in a child's brain during this time is that they build vocabulary. By preschool age, children can already recognize over 10,000 words. Well before they can read, they already know 10,000 words. It's amazing. They hear millions of words spoken at home, on TV, on the radio, when they're walking up and down the street. Our kids drink in language. Now, how can parents, because I know it's one thing to, I think we all agree that reading is important, but what can parents do to support oral language development that leads to reading? What do you do when your kids are little that will help them as they go to school and move towards the fundamental skill of reading? Rich conversation is by far the very best thing that we can work on together as families to help our kids read. Conversation foundations build the building blocks to be able to read later. And it doesn't mean like, you can talk with your kids, but talk to them as adults. Don't hold back complex vocabulary. Use big words and narrate the world around you. Some of my favorite, I grew up, both of my grandfathers loved to tell stories. And I can remember almost verbatim every one of those stories. Tell your kids stories about where you grew up and how you grew up and the challenges that you encountered. They love that world. And you're not just telling them great stories, you're engaging them in the process of preparing to read. Play conversational games. I Spy with my little eye, and have them start looking around and identifying things and learning the word for that item, that store, that tree, that flower, whatever it may be. Or just start researching and talking about a topic together that you're interested in, that your children are interested in. Reading is also important. The kids need to be read to. A child's vocabulary and understanding of language, there's no substitute for being read to. Written language, they're seeing the words even if they can't read yet. They're learning that text flows from left to right. There's so many things that they're learning. But understand that if reading is not your cup of tea, talk. Talking and reading, conversing and asking and debating and discussing puts our kids on the path for being able to read. And I'm going to go really quickly through this because I'm about to turn it over to one of our content experts, and she will go into foundational skills, and then Bria will go into knowledge building curriculum, and that will be amazing for us as we think about how to move forward. But just to understand how this fits together, there are 2 huge components in how children learn how to read during the elementary years. The first part is foundational skills. Sometimes you'll hear phonics thrown around. Phonics is a part of foundational skills, but it's not all of foundational skills. Foundational skills, if you can remember back to before you could read, you had to start by sounding out letters. You had to learn what each letter meant, what it sounded like, and then how you could put those words together, you could put those letters together. And then pretty soon you could take those letters and turn them into words. And you could take those words and turn it into sentences and sentences into paragraphs until you were a master with language. But the most important are those foundational skills of learning the sounds and learning what to do with them to move towards reading. And we also know that by gathering knowledge, reading to learn, it gives kids an advantage later in learning how to read because they have knowledge on the subject that they're interested in. Real reading instruction begins in elementary school, and I'm now going to turn it over to one of our content experts. As Ethan mentioned earlier, Sarah is a teacher in Putnam County. She's amazing with kids and has a rich knowledge of what we're discussing tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to talk to us about foundational skills.
Thanks, Scott. I am so excited. I think my cheeks are hurting because I've smiled so much just seeing everybody that's with us tonight. But like Scott said, we're going to talk about foundational skills. And he talked a little bit about speaking and the language. That's something that comes natural to us. And but our written language, that is a man-made invention. That's something that we have learned a lot about. There's been a lot of research done about how the brain learns to read. And across the state of Tennessee, educators are also being educated on that so that we can do better in our classrooms and help parents and kids learn how to help each other read. So tonight, we're going to kind of take a step into my classroom. If you'll do that with me, you might pretend that you're in first grade again, and I might ask you to kind of interact with me a little bit. That way you can put yourself in the shoes of your child as they learn to read. But when we learn to read in class, we talk about sounds first. And we know that the letter C makes the K sound and the letter H makes the sound. And in our classroom, or in my classroom, I like to talk about those two letters separately are kind of like shapes. Like the letter C might be the triangle by itself. And the letter H makes the sound like a square by itself. But when we start to put letters together, like Scott mentioned earlier, we start to see that certain letters, when they're together, make a totally different sound. So we put a triangle on top of a square, we have a house. And together, the letter C and the letter H makes the ch sound. And when we talk about that sounds first approach to reading, it kind of takes away, it really lays the foundation and takes away that guesswork on learning to read and applying those sounds. So what does this look like in a classroom? On this screen, you can see a teacher, and that's actually in my school building, so that's really exciting. But this is where I'm going to kind of ask for your help. So the first thing that might happen in your child's classroom or in your own classroom is we're just going to practice hearing that sound and saying that sound. So I'm going to make a sound, and I want you to repeat it back. And when you repeat it back, I want you to think about what your mouth does when you make that sound, okay? We're going to do this 3 times. So, return. When we think about what our tongue is doing when we're making that sound, what our mouth is doing, all of that, talking about it and just feeling what that sound feels like when we say it and what it sounds like, that lays the foundation to being able to read. So the first thing we're going to do is the teacher is going to make the sound and the child is going to repeat that back. And then we're going to go into some practice. This activity that you see is something we call a spelling tree, and it's really awesome to see it done in action. So what happens first is there are some words on leaves and we read them. So the child might read them on their own or with a partner, and they're just thinking about what letters in this activity make the K sound in these words. And throughout the year, we talk about different ways to spell different sounds. And on this tree, we have 4 different ways in first grade that we learn to spell the K sound. And each branch has a purpose. At the very bottom, those are the ways to spell the K sound that we see the most often when we're reading or when we're spelling. And then as we move up, those are the least common ways to spell those sounds. At the very top, we have odd ducks, which is kind of silly. And we get asked that sometimes, why do we have ducks in a tree? Well, they don't really belong in a tree. And these words don't belong on this tree because they don't follow the sound spellings that we've learned. But we'll read a word, we'll talk about how that K sound is spelled, and then we sort them based on their spelling. Later on, the children might be able to come up with their own words that they see around them in the classroom. And this is even something that you could do at home, where if you're in a grocery store or walking down the street and you look for words with the K sound or other sounds, and you can talk about maybe how those are spelled. That's a great way to include that conversation like Scott was talking about. And then last, which Robin will talk a little bit more about this in a little bit, we're going to apply what we've talked about in context, so in our decodable readers. And these readers are not the most beautiful books. They may not look like what you get in the library or off of a bookshelf, but they are beautiful because our kids are able to read these with success. When in a decodable reader, they only encounter words that they've been taught how to decode or how to sound out. And in this particular story, they are reading using the sound spelled ER and the R sound spelled AR, and they're designed in a really special way. So if there's a new sound like ER, it's printed bolded, and that's just kind of there like a flag when we come across it when we're reading, like, oh, I just learned this sound, and I know that when I see these two letters together, they make one sound. So these, like I said, these are an excellent resource because our kids are able to find success. They're not having to guess what the next word is based off of the picture or off of just trying to figure out what word goes there based off that first sound. But these will lead up into what Bria will talk about in just a little bit, the knowledge, because they begin to read about what they're learning about in that read aloud section that she's going to talk about. But now we're going to talk about what to look for in the classroom. So if you were to step into a classroom today, some things that you would want to see is a curriculum that teaches the phonics and the phonemic awareness every day in a very systematic way. And what that means is we're going to start with the most basic before we move into complex, and then using those decodable readers so that students have success. And then some things that we're moving away from as we learn more is lessons or books that encourage kids to guess based off of pictures or the first letter in a word, and then an overemphasis on memorizing words. And Robin is going to talk a little bit more about how to get some of these decodables in your house and how to use them.
So I used to be a first grade teacher, and I'm telling you right now, I was never as strong of a teacher as Sarah and Bria that you're going to meet in a little bit, because they know more about how kids learn how to read than anyone I've ever known. And I'm so proud of you, and I'm so excited Tennessee teachers are learning all about this. So we had to find a way to bring partners into our family, just like the Salvation Army's in our family. So the way we wanted to bring parents in was say, hey, here's some great tools that you can use to work with your kids at home. So the Decodables are free for families of kindergarten, first, and second graders in Tennessee, and they're easy to order, and you can go right online and get them, and there's no shipping. So absolutely, you saw a picture there a minute ago of Bria. Her daughter is sitting there just like it's Christmas with her Decodables spread out on her lap. So, but you know what? Sometimes when we have something in our house, we don't use them. It's super tough to get better. So I'm going to show you an example. I know the kids in the audience know what these are weights. And so I do not work with my muscles with these weights, and they just kind of sit on my shelf. So what I want you to do is I want you to challenge yourselves to build up your reading muscles by picking up those decodables and doing these very simple things. And it will just be such a great help for your child on the reading journey. So first of all, at the beginning of the book, you will see what sounds that this decodable is going to help your child recognize and build and say. So in this particular decodable, you'll see the sounds. You'll see their picture of the ear. When your child sees the EE, they will know that sounds like E as in sheep. And when your child sees that AE combination, they will know that says A as in cake. So those are the two main sounds you'll see. And Sarah told you throughout the decodable, there will be words bolded, and that those are the words that have those two combinations in them. Then here are some practice words. So for the practice words, these are words that are super tricky to figure out how to sound out. So you just have to remember what they look like, and then it becomes automatic. So the practice words that you'll be pulling attention to with your child are was and said. So those are just two practice words. As you're looking through the book, you can help your child point out and get quicker at reading them. And then finally, fluency. It gives you some little tips and hints about how children can start to read more quickly, but we would rather children read sounding out the words and read the sentences fluidly and understand the story than just read super, super quickly. So reading it well and with the right sound and the right pace is much better than reading fast. But also, this is my favorite thing. The last piece is called inflection. And that means whenever you're reading a book, you get to be really dramatic and you get to point out and become the characters and use those voices. So it helps parents teach kids how to start to have inflection when they're reading. I'm going to show you an example. So you'll see on this page about Scott and Lee, you see Lee the sheep had a bad week last week. And so you can see there, the bolded words are the ones that have exactly those letter combinations they told you to look for. So every time you see an EE, as in E, you'll see those words bolded on the text. Then at the bottom of some pages, not every page, you'll see a little reading skill. So it tells you right there what to do. Say the word sheep. Do you hear the long E sound, E, in the middle? Can you find other words on this page that have the long E like sheep? So children, that's that building that phonemic awareness. So that's letting them see. Every time I see an EE, I will know that that says E. And then they can apply that in future readings that they have. Now we're going to talk to Bria. You're going to be amazed at the things that Bria will show you about what children can do. There are children in her classroom, and I think you'll be really wowed at what work Bria can pull out of the children and what they've learned about in their time with her.
Well, thank you, Robin. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bria Sibley. I am a second grade teacher in Hamilton County, so I'm in Chattanooga. This work is especially important to me because I have a 4-year-old daughter. So she was on the screen a few slides back, as Robin said, with her Decodable Readers, because although she can't fluently read through them herself, we do read them together, and I have her repeat the sentences back to me. So they may be a little above her at this point, but it's about that exposure and reading with your child. So it'll be a fun year because she'll be in pre-K down the hallway as I'm teaching second grade. So I promise you, parents, I'm in the fire with you, which is why this work is really important to me, because I'm seeing it at home as well as seeing it in my classroom. So I want to talk to you about the second essential, which is building knowledge or building students' background knowledge. Helping children understand what they read by building content knowledge is essential for students in early grades. So we talked about the way that kids acquire knowledge and how reading to your child helps your child learn more language and vocabulary. But it also helps them acquire more knowledge about the world, which is really critical to helping kids understand what they're reading about. So it's those day-to-day real-life experiences that you're having with your child and talking through those experiences, going to the grocery store and narrating your trip to the grocery store, taking a trip to the zoo or a museum and identifying the things that are around you. Having those conversations with your children can open a box of conversations. So you may be asking yourself as a parent, what does a great classroom look like that builds this background knowledge? So you'll see on your screen a couple of texts that I used within my own classroom last year. And as you can see, these are all different types of texts, but they're all about the same thing, essentially. All about seeds, plants, pollination. So kids read multiple books about science and social studies to really help get an understanding of the topics. So a lot of the times you'll see that we're doing literacy work, but we're intertwining social studies and science standards so that we're hitting multiple things at one time, as well as writing, which I'll talk about coming up. So I like you to imagine being in second grade again, being in Miss Sibley's class, be a fun day. And we're going to build some background knowledge, right? So we're going to study about pollinators. And like I said, I had all these texts available to my students. So they were able to get information from different sources, but they were all about the same thing. So they were getting different information from different angles. So they learned new vocabulary, such as words like it's proboscis and pollen, words that Ms. Sibley had to make sure I looked at the pronunciation to make sure I was saying them correct with my students. The vocabulary is immaculate through a lot of the units that they're studying across Tennessee. So they were able to hear this consistent vocabulary, and they were able to have the information stick more simply because there was repeated information across different texts. So on your screen, if you're able to see, if not, I'm going to call out a few of them for you. You'll see some questions that I've had students to ask during dialogue with one another. So in the topic that we were studying about plant secrets, they were asking each other, what do the containers do that the plants are in? Why do seeds need to be protected through hot and cold weather? And how long does the hard fruit protect the seeds? I don't know if I were quite asking questions like this in second grade. So to just hear the students dialogue with one another blew my mind, and is what kind of got me to writing these questions down. And just, I didn't have to tell them to ask these questions. These are questions that they were getting from things that they were hearing from me reading aloud, which I'll talk about shortly as well, but also from them just having conversations with each other. So while teaching this unit, I highly encourage students to refer back to the text and use their text features such as captions and diagrams to gather information. So sometimes it may seem as though your student is working on a unit for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks in on time. It's because we are. And it's because we're really digging into the content and we're really juicing it all for what it is. At this age, kids are sponges. So it's better to front load them and see what sticks than to not raise the expectation level for students. If you draw attention to your screen, you'll see what some writing. So this is what a student is writing about ancient Romans. They're learning about ancient Romans. So within my classroom, we did a lot of writing, especially on a unit about pollinators. Whatever we're reading about, we write about. They're reading about the Romans, they were writing about the Romans. So at the end of the unit of studying pollinators, we were able to do a learning celebration, is what I like to call it, where students were able to come up, they were able to have a presentation, they had posters where they drew their own pollinators, the captions, the diagrams, and I was able to record it and put it on Class Dojo for the parents because parents weren't able to come in this year. So hopefully that'll change next year, but just really boosting up the morale of the classroom and giving students that confidence to be able to public speak, which is a skill that they may need later in life. So I really like being able to build up my learners so that they can take those skills and apply them in other areas of their life. And once again, it gave them an opportunity to practice their vocabulary and really have confidence and take ownership in the learning that they did within the classroom that year. All right, so additionally, one thing that I wasn't able to do as much close with my students last year because of COVID was being able to have everyone come to my carpet and have a read aloud. Now, although we weren't able to have it last year, I'm sure even a lot of parents remember that time of being able to come to the carpet and have their teacher read a book to you. Well, as we said earlier, it doesn't start in the classroom, parents. This is where it's on us, being able to pull your little one next to you and simply read to them. Although it may be above their head, it's the vocabulary that they're listening for, and it's the sequence of a story that you're creating with your student and being able to recall those details and asking, are they comprehending what I'm talking about? Like listening, but really comprehending what I'm talking about. So this goes on even through middle school, because even if kids aren't able to read on grade level, if they're hearing text read aloud to them, they'll be able to have conversations with their peers as well. So like Sarah said earlier, written language is a man-made invention. So it's really on us as parents to make sure we're exposing our kids to read alouds, that we're having them read to them. I'll even throw in that if they're going to be on YouTube, have them listen to a book on YouTube. I'm for integrating technology within learning. So use those apps to the best of your ability and you'll benefit from it. So I'm going to let Scott really harp on why it's so important for everyone to be exposed to grade level text, no matter what your grade level is. So Scott, take us away.
Oh, thank you, Bria. And thank you for sharing your classroom and your practice. Just like Sarah, it's amazing. I had the privilege of being in hundreds of classrooms every year in a lot of elementary classrooms. And I mean, I mentioned earlier, I was a high school teacher, and I've just got to say, I'm always blown away at the work that our elementary teachers do in their classrooms, because they bring in kids that start off in kindergarten. Some can read, many can't. And in the span of a couple months, they have kids not only sounding out words, but reading and writing and learning at just exponential rates. It's so amazing to watch. So Sarah, Bria, thank you for the work that you do each day. And I want to turn and talk just a little bit about what we see. There are the essentials of building knowledge and how all kids work with grade level texts. One of the things that used to happen is what were called leveled reading groups. We would take, at the start of a class, we would test kids and figure out what their reading level was, and then we would put them into groups. And so it might have looked like a little bit like something, it could have looked something like the picture below, but you would have the teacher working with 4 or 5 kids while the rest worked independently. Sometimes you would see little buckets of books, and they would be assigned to the kids based on their reading level. Now, the problem with that is that advanced kids got more advanced books, more interesting books, more things that were relevant and interesting to those kids. Readers that were struggling or developing received books that were at a lower than grade level, sometimes several grades below. There's a classic story about a sixth grade classroom reading, sixth grade task books, the advanced kids reading eighth or ninth grade texts, and one boy having to read Clifford the Big Red Dog that was a first grade book. And you can imagine what it's like to be a kid and receive books that are below grade level, and the effect that takes on your morale and your love of school and everything else. What we see today is what this picture actually reflects is that all of our kids are reading books, are reading texts that are on grade level. And so you heard Bria say that, in her classroom, they're working with pollinators. You know what? I would almost guarantee, and she could speak to this better than me, but I would almost guarantee that when they start, not all of the kids in her classroom are on the same reading level. Some struggle to pronounce the word pollinator. Others can do it instantly. I would argue that there are a lot of adults that would struggle with some of the words that are in those second grade texts. We have a fourth grade text in my district, a fourth grade module on the Great Heart. And the first time I went in the classroom, I had to pull out my phone and Google words so I would know the words that the fourth graders were using. And they were spouting them off left and right and enjoying that they had a knowledge that the adults in the room didn't have. And you know what? A lot of those kids wanted to be cardiologists at the end of that module. It opened up a world to them because they got to engage grade level text. We have to have kids on grade level text. Robin mentioned weights earlier, and the same thing that we do by using those decodable readers when they're little, as they get a little older, these texts, these knowledge building texts become hugely important from kindergarten on, because what we're doing is we're stretching our muscles. And what happens is if a kid's not at grade level, we help them just a little bit. But what they need is a nudge, not taking the book away and giving them something that's easier to read. We want grade level text in the hands of each of our kids so that they can grow the reading muscles necessary for success in life. And that's so important for us to do across the board. Another thing that you should see is that the learning builds across the grade individually, but across your child's school experience. Here you can see an example from a first grader in August versus a first grader in January. The prompt in August was, what lesson did the fable teach you? And you get a really nice sentence. So this is great in August for a kid coming back from summer break and saying, I think the wolf is going to eat the sheep. That's a good sentence. But by January, you can see that this child can write a paragraph. And we see this all the time. I see this in every school that I go to since we've shifted to our current approach, which is building the ability to sounds first approach vocabulary, and then the ability with the foundational skills, and then the ability to gain knowledge through what we're reading. We see kids gaining and growing constantly. What I love, and I think both Sarah and Bria hit this, is that we're not just reading for no purpose. We are reading to acquire and gain knowledge, and not just to gain knowledge, but to use that knowledge. Bria mentioned how her kids are doing performances and writing and scripting. And, she mentioned YouTube. Our kids love to make videos. That's a full use of language, is taking something that we've read and producing something that we can share with our friends and our parents in the world by taking what we've learned and expanding it and extending it. You should see in your child's classroom that learning building across the grade, and then you should see it pick up in the next grade and push it just a little farther. Again, we're building those muscles and growing. And it's so exciting to watch as a teacher and as a parent. And so that brings me to this part of our presentation, which is the perfect pair, which is families and schools working together. Y'all, this is more than we can do, any of us, on our own. We have to work together. We're going to do our part in school. And then what's amazing is we can work together and talk, and we can extend what we're doing at school, at home, and our kids will grow so fast and they will learn so quickly. It's amazing. They're like sponges. They grow so fast and they're so excited. Read aloud, read to, and read with. Students who read 15 minutes or more per day make quicker gains in reading. So when you're working with your child, let me say this. The most important thing at home is for you to let your kid take center stage. Let them do the work. This is their time to shine with what they've learned at school and what they want to share and read to you. So encourage them to read aloud. to read to you. You can read aloud to them, or they can read to you, and then read together. Just 15 minutes of that a day will make a huge difference. Ask questions. You don't have to be the expert. Our kids are reading things now in second grade that we didn't know about when we were in high school or college. It is amazing what they're learning and the information that they're processing. But you don't have to be the expert. Do you know what your children will love more than anything? Is for you to let them be the teacher and ask them what they're learning and ask questions about the text and let them teach you. They love that. Or just pick a topic that interests both of you and learn together. And smart screen time. When it's screen time, choose TV programs for your child about science or history. Quite often in their curriculum at school, what they're doing in class, there will be a topic. I mentioned the Great Heart. Bria mentioned pollinators. There are a lot of these. It may be mythology. It may be Cinderella. It could be a whole lot of things. Find some things on TV that are extensions or connected to that. If you'll talk to your child's teacher, I know if you ask Bria or Sarah, they would love nothing more than to have conversations with you about other books, other shows, other ways that you could engage and grow in knowledge. I know as a teacher, nothing excited me more than have a great conversation with a parent about how we could work together to help our kids learn and grow. I mean, it's as exciting to a teacher as it is to a parent. So what should you see at school? You really need to see books on science and history. For too long, we've not put science and history in the classroom. You ought to be seeing that your children are reading books about science and history, whether it's about pollinators or about the heart, or whether it's about the American Revolution or world history, world civilization. You should see those books being read in class and writing connected to those topics. If we take a lot of time and read and don't spend almost an equal time writing and speaking, then we're really missing the boat. Our kids need to not only be able to read, but they need to express their ideas in written and spoken form. You should see read alouds. And the teacher can help you with on grade level books your student is working with, even if your student is reading below grade level. We mentioned 15 minutes of reading earlier. If your child is taking on a task of reading a book that's a little bit about above where their reading is, imagine the excitement that y'all are going to have as a family when you give them just a little bit of help and they can read that book. They're going to be so proud of themselves and you're going to be so proud of them. And it's a celebration that you can then tell their teacher about, and they'll celebrate it together as a class. Some red flags. If your child is spending a significant amount of time in a reading group based on reading level, then that's something you need to take up with your school, because it's essential for your child to be, I can't emphasize enough how important it is for your child to have an appropriate level text based on what grade they're in. And then how do I support my struggling reader? Reach out to your child's teacher, guidance counselor, or principal. Again, I've brought up Sarah and Bria a number of times. I think Robin would agree too. Being asked as a teacher, whether it's a first grade teacher or a 12th grade teacher, kindergarten or sixth grade, we love to have parents reach out to say, what can we do to help? Your guidance counselors, your principal, they would love to help you identify where your child's reading is and what can be done to help. Ask what the school knows about your child's individual learning needs. Robin mentioned earlier that she was a little bit jealous of Bria and Sarah because they've had the opportunity to learn things that we used to not know when we were teaching. I taught English for years, and I had no idea how to teach a kid that was struggling to know how to read. Now we have all kinds of data. We have all kinds of information that we can use to help kids learn to read, and we can share that with you. If you will ask, we can help. Like, your child needs to do a little bit of work with those decodable readers. If you'll take those that you got and work with those at night, you'll see a huge gain, and we'll be able to work together. Can they read fluently? How's their inflection? How's their speed? All those things, we can share common understanding and work together towards helping a child that's struggling. Ask if the practice outline before are happening. A big question is my child working with grade level text? Again, that is just hugely important. All right, and how should my child's school support my struggling reader? Schools need to be assessing skill gaps. Our schools really do this well, but you should ask your school, like, what gaps does my child have? And, what's happening? Ask if your child can be assigned to a small group for extra practice with those skills while still staying in grade level work with the rest of the class. Those are things that schools are committed to do for your children. I'm going to turn it over to Robin now, and she's got a whole list. I mean, this is one of the most exciting things the Tennessee Department of Education has done, is put together a ton of ways to integrate reading, to get stronger, to get faster, to get better, but to also pique the curiosity and interest of our kids. We also want to thank the Salvation Army for their partnership as well, because it's just exciting to work together with parents, with great organizations like the Salvation Army, and to see the great resources that the Tennessee Department of Education has put before us. And y'all, there is no one better to talk about reading and resources than Robin, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
You know why? It's because reading is so important, and we love our Tennessee kiddos. So have you ever been to a job site where you saw them building a house and it was just so amazing because you were starting to see everything come together? But I bet you saw a lot of people there working, and I bet you saw a lot of different tools being used. So guess what? A lot of people working to get our Tennessee kids reading are people like the Salvation Army who are supporting us, district leaders like Scott, the teachers like Sarah and Bria. And now, you know what? We have to have our parents fold in and support us, but you have to build the house with tools. So Tennessee has given some tools for our families. They're going to put things right in your lap for free that you can use with your kiddos. So first of all, you can sign up for this free text messaging system from Ready4K. And there are hundreds of thousands of families using it right now in Tennessee. I signed up for it, even though I have a 14-year-old. I signed up for it because now I can see pop-ups of when I get a text that says, hey, Mom, when you're in the grocery store, talk about this with your child. Or, hey, Dad, when you're playing with your child with blocks, talk about these things. So just simple tips.
All right, Robin's frozen, so until she comes back, let me jump back in. Resources for families. She mentioned the Ready4K text. Those are incredible. I have an 18 and a 21-year-old, and I wish that I'd signed up for them just so I could look at them. Our Decodables, Sarah mentioned these earlier, and they've come up a number of times. Robin mentioned them too. These free decodable readers for K2 students allow early readers practice sounding out words and building reading skills at home. They are a great resource for our kindergarten through second grade families. If you'll just Google Reading 360 and Decodable books, you'll be able to sign up and get these free resources. All right, and then resources for families from the Tennessee Department of Education. Teaching Tennessee, last year, what I love that we did last year in Tennessee is when COVID hit, we didn't just stop learning. Our Department of Education partnered with PBS and with classroom teachers from across the state, and they built out lessons that they could play on PBS. So if you look, there's a schedule, there's a sample one right here, but your local PBS station, Channel 8, if you're in Middle Tennessee, has all of these up. I see them all the time on there. Occasionally I flip by just to see, because we had some teachers in Sumner County that participated. I'll tell you the funniest thing is if a teacher from your district participated in this, the kids think they're absolute rock stars because they see them on TV. Some of our teachers started getting fan mail from our kids when they saw them on Channel 8, and they would tell them that they thought it was so amazing that their teacher was on TV. This is a great resource. If you're at home, Bria mentioned earlier, take advantage of device time. It's great. Throw it on the TV and they can catch up with some pre-K foundational skills, first grade ELA. There's math on there. There's a lot of great resources available on our Teaching Tennessee on PBS. And then some other resources, STEAM Hub. Now, I know in education, we are really guilty of using acronyms. So let me just spell out what this is. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, STEAM. So anytime you see STEAM, what it's talking about is, like, I'll give you an example. My daughter is 18 years old and getting ready to go to college, and she is now going to be an architectural engineer. But up until her sophomore year in high school, she had no idea that she was going to pursue a career in engineering. She thought she was going to go be an English teacher like her dad because she loved to read. She liked poetry. She did not think that she liked science because she had never really been exposed to hands-on STEAM type activities. And so what happened is that sophomore year in high school, she took a class and found out that she loved engineering. She still loves the arts, but she really loves engineering. It's found her calling. What we have to do is not wait until sophomore year in high school for kids to be exposed to science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. we need from the very first day they walk into one of our schools for our kids to be exposed to these wonderful resources. And what TDOE has done, for the Department of Education has done for us, is create a STEAM resource hub. There are so many wonderful activities that our best teachers from across the state and our best schools have put together. It's like watching wizardry. There's all kinds of fun experiments, some like the old baking soda and vinegar volcano, sometimes doing amazing things with bottles. And almost every one of the activities features things that you already have at home. And it's a great way to engage our kids in not just reading, but reading for a purpose, which is gaining knowledge about science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And then these are some additional resources for families, reading guides, literacy materials, reading rockets. Just really want to tip my hat to the Department of Education, because they put together so many wonderful resources for parents as you're trying to find ways to help and support your child at home. All right, and I think at this point, we are going to turn it over. Oh, no, I'm wrong. I misspoke, and I apologize. It's back to me. I'd like to open up for questions from our audience. Let's see, Jeff, do you have a question? I see a hand up.
Yeah, so that STEAM Hub is available. There's resources there. Where was that at again?
It's on the Tennessee Department of Education website. There's a STEAM Hub.
I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay. Dr. Coons is going to drop a link in the chat, Jeff. I'm telling you, it's really amazing. You'll really like it a lot. There's some great activities there for our kids.
Thank you.
And then Patricia asked, how do individuals sign up? Patricia, is that for the Reading 360 and the Decodable Readers, I presume?
Yes. I put the link in the chat, the direct link to the TNEDU website. The Decodables link is in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, it's in the chat. And then also, if you can't see the chat, it's really easy to find if you'll just Google the Decodable Readers and put Tennessee Department of Education, but the link is there in the chat. Can you describe what middle school families should do if they have struggling readers? That's a great question. Would anyone else on the panel, Robin or Lisa, would anyone y'all like to address that, or I can jump in and take a stab at it?
I think there is a point where, as a middle school reader, we have to encourage and practice reading. But Scott, if someone could reverse the slide to the slide before, there were several resources to support families around if a child is struggling with reader. I would start with understood.org and look at where your child is struggling. Are they struggling with vocabulary? Are they struggling with the sounds? Are they just struggling with the opportunity to read? And sometimes the opportunity to read and getting used to the vocabulary and things in the reading, it's an opportunity to use some of the things Bree talked about, where you read with the vocabulary and you use the YouTube books and things like that just to build vocabulary and learning. If it is something around sounding out words and struggling like that, there may be interventions that we need to provide to support your child, or opportunities to get in and dig in those words. Understood.org and your child's school are outstanding resources to support you with trying to figure out what's going on with your middle school child, because a lot of different things could be going on in that middle school space. So I encourage you to speak with your child's teacher. I encourage you to use the understood.org and really give your child the opportunity to read without having to decode those words and figure out those sounds, and listen to audiobooks and listen to books on YouTube, and just build that love of what reading can be without the struggles that happen to be in that decoding component and figuring out those sounds, as Robin talked about with the Decodables.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback off of Dr. Coons, I think, an earlier slide mentioned the importance of communicating with your school. The good thing, this is the best time to be in school for reading. We have learned so much, and we're used to middle schools and high schools really struggle to help struggling readers. Now we have a ton of resources. I know, like in Sumner County, we have resources for intervention all the way through 12th grade. We have all kinds of supports to help, including, we try to pull out kids 15 to 30 minutes a day if they're struggling, just to give them some very targeted targeted intervention. As Dr. Coons mentioned, it's a little harder in middle school because they're usually, if a child is still struggling in middle school, there are some different things going on, and it really requires a lot of communication between you as the parent and your child's teacher in the school. But those resources are there, and like we mentioned before, we get really excited. I can remember when I was a middle school assistant principal, we had a young lady that came to us in 5th grade, and she didn't even know her alphabet. And our teachers worked with her solid for about 18 months. And at the end of that, she was a proficient grade level reader. And I mean, this is a little nerdy, but we were practically running around in the gym celebrating like we would a touchdown or a basket because it was so exciting. And to see the confidence in her, it was amazing. So if you will reach out to your school too and take advantage of those resources that Dr. Coons mentioned, there really is a lot of ways to support our struggling readers in middle school and high school. Any other questions? All right, so I see some faces at our different centers at the Salvation Army, and from what I understand, we've had some hot chocolate chip cookies, we've had some dancing, we've had some excitement all day, and I'm just wondering, before I turn it back over to Major Frisell, if we could just give everybody almost like a pep rally. Let's give a big round of applause and a shout for the Salvation Army and the work that they've done. So can we see some shouting and hollering and support? Come on, I think y'all can be a little louder. Come on now, I see you behind Major Frisell. We need to hear it. Let's go.
All right, they want to hear it.
That's great. I'm gonna turn it over back to Major Frisell.
Well, friends, thank you very much. Thank you so much. For those online and those who are here, we invite you to take a survey on tonight's time together. But let me say with deep appreciation, thank you to all of our friends at Curriculum Matters, Tennessee Department of Education, for believing in the literacy of our children so that they can get ahead and stay ahead in Tennessee. Now, friends who are here, let me say a couple of things. The state is offering so many great opportunities to us, but we know that for some parents, like my mom, she worked 2 jobs and sometimes 3. And that's why the place you're at tonight has learning pods available to you so that you can come and have some help and have someone read to your children. Also, we make available resource hubs. So even tonight, for those in Nashville, you'll be getting a bag of food to go home just to help a little bit in the cupboard. And so know that we want to take this journey with you and with your children during their literacy moments. And I must say thank you. The way that I caught up by reading and writing was actually my sisters reading and writing to me, reading with me. And so maybe siblings can help with the learning pods and have a great time. So we thank you very much to the state. Thank you very much to Curriculum Matters and all the partners. And Scott, the thing that you didn't know is that the cookies are warm. They're smelling them right now. The ice cream's starting to melt. We're going to make ice cream. We're going to make ice cream sandwiches. And thank you for helping us love our children and teach them the way to a brighter future. Lord,
no better way to celebrate than ice cream cookies. Y'all go have fun.
Yay!